2 years after exposing the Global Hope Foundation scandal, I thought I'd seen the worst of human deception. I was wrong. The case that walked into my Ocean City office on a rainy Thursday morning would reveal a truth so twisted, so unthinkable, that it would challenge everything I believed about maternal love and family bonds. I'm Emma Richardson, and this is the story of how I uncovered the darkest secret of Ocean City's most beloved mother, a woman who had been systematically destroying children's lives while being praised as a community hero. What started as a simple custody dispute became a nightmare investigation into child trafficking, insurance fraud, and a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of our local government. The woman who sat across from my desk that morning was Rebecca Sterling, a 45-year-old social worker known throughout Ocean City for her dedication to helping troubled families. She had been named Mother of the Year 3 times by the local newspaper and had adopted 7 children from the foster care system over the past 15 years. The community saw her as a saint. But the story Rebecca told me that day painted a very different picture. "Ms. Richardson, I need your help," Rebecca said, her voice trembling as she clutched a manila envelope. "My daughter Emma, not my biological daughter, but the girl I've raised for 8 years, she's been taken from me. The courts say I have no legal right to her because the adoption papers were fraudulent." I studied Rebecca's face carefully. She appeared genuinely distraught, but something in her manner made me uneasy. "Tell me about these adoption papers." Rebecca opened the envelope and spread several documents across my desk. "I adopted Emma through a private agency called Sunshine Family Services when she was 3 years old. They told me her parents had died in a car accident and she had no other family. But now Child Protective Services is saying the agency never existed and that Emma was stolen from her real family." The documents looked official at first glance: birth certificates, medical records, adoption agreements. But as I examined them more closely, I noticed subtle inconsistencies in the letterheads and signatures that suggested they might be forgeries. They came to me. I had expressed interest in adopting through the state system, and they contacted me directly. They said they had a special little girl who needed a loving home and that they thought I would be perfect for her. This was already raising red flags. Legitimate adoption agencies don't typically seek out prospective parents through cold contact. "Do you have any contact information for the agency? Phone numbers, addresses?" Rebecca shook her head. "They said they were closing down after Emma's adoption, something about funding issues. All my communication was through a caseworker named Sarah Phillips, but I haven't been able to reach her since the adoption was finalized." I made notes while she spoke, but something was bothering me about Rebecca's story. If she had truly believed this was a legitimate adoption, why hadn't she contacted the police when CPS claimed the agency was fraudulent? Why come to a lawyer first? "Rebecca, what specifically are you hoping I can do for you?" "I want you to prove that my adoption of Emma was legitimate. I want my daughter back. She's been with me for 8 years. I'm the only mother she remembers. It's not fair to tear us apart now." After Rebecca left, I sat in my office thinking about her case. On the surface, it seemed straightforward: a mother fighting to keep her adopted daughter. But something felt off about the whole situation. I decided to do some basic research into Rebecca Sterling's background. What I found was indeed impressive. She had worked for Ocean City Social Services for 20 years, had received numerous awards for her dedication to child welfare, and had been featured in several newspaper articles about her large adoptive family. But as I dug deeper, I began to notice some troubling patterns. According to public records, Rebecca had adopted 7 children over 15 years. That alone wasn't unusual. Many families adopt multiple children. But what was strange was the documentation surrounding each adoption. Every single child had been adopted through different agencies, and in several cases, those agencies appeared to have closed or disappeared shortly after the adoptions were finalized. I called my private investigator friend Jack Riley. "Jack, I need you to look into someone for me. Rebecca Sterling, she's a social worker here in Ocean City. Something about her adoption history doesn't add up. What kind of timeline are we looking at? 15 years of adoptions, 7 children total. I'm particularly interested in the agencies she used and whether any of these kids have families looking for them. Jack called me back 2 days later with disturbing news. Emma, I've been digging into Rebecca Sterling, and what I found is very troubling. 5 of the 7 adoption agencies she used have no records of ever existing. The addresses listed for them lead to empty lots or businesses that have never heard of child services. What about the children themselves? Any missing person reports that match? That's where it gets really dark. I found at least 3 missing children reports that match the ages and descriptions of Sterling's adopted kids. One case particularly stands out, a little girl named Lucy Chen who disappeared from a playground in Portland 8 years ago. The age and physical description match perfectly with the child Sterling calls Emma. My blood ran cold. Was Rebecca Sterling not a loving adoptive mother, but a child trafficker who had been operating under the cover of her social work position? Jack, I need you to find everything you can about these missing children cases, and see if you can locate any of the social workers or officials who supposedly processed these adoptions. While Jack continued his investigation, I decided to pay a visit to Ocean City Social Services to learn more about Rebecca's work there. I spoke with her supervisor, Margaret Hoffman, who had nothing but praise for Rebecca's dedication and skills. Rebecca has been one of our most valuable employees, Margaret told me. She has a special gift for connecting with troubled children. Many of the families she's worked with credit her with saving their children's lives. Has she ever been involved in processing adoptions through your office? Not directly. Rebecca works primarily with families in crisis situations. But she often refers families to adoption agencies when that seems like the best solution for the children involved. Do you happen to know which agencies she typically refers families to? Margaret thought for a moment. Now that you mention it, I'm not sure. Rebecca always handles those referrals privately. She says she has special connections with agencies that specialize in difficult cases. This was becoming more suspicious by the minute. Rebecca was in a position to identify vulnerable children and families, and she apparently had special connections with adoption agencies that seemed to exist only on paper. I decided I needed to see Rebecca's home and meet some of these children myself. I called her and asked if I could visit to better understand her family situation for the case. Rebecca's house was a large Victorian home in one of Ocean City's most prestigious neighborhoods, far more expensive than a social worker's salary should allow. She greeted me at the door with a warm smile, but I noticed her tension when I asked to meet her children. Most of them are at school or activities, she said quickly, but Emma is here. The poor thing has been so confused since CPS took her and then brought her back pending the legal proceedings. Rebecca led me to a sitting room where a young girl with dark hair and sad eyes sat reading. When Rebecca introduced us, the child looked up briefly but didn't speak. Emma's been having a hard time adjusting, Rebecca explained. The trauma of being taken away has been very difficult for her. I knelt down to the girl's level. Hi, Emma. I'm a lawyer. I'm trying to help make sure you get to stay with people who love you. The child looked at me with an expression that seemed much older than her supposed 8 years. Are you going to send me away again? She asked quietly. I'm going to try to make sure you're safe and happy. Can you tell me how long you've lived here with Rebecca? Emma glanced nervously at Rebecca before answering. I don't remember living anywhere else. But sometimes I have dreams about a different house with a big dog and a garden with yellow flowers. Rebecca quickly interrupted. Children often have vivid imaginations, especially those who've experienced trauma in their early years. But Emma's description reminded me of something Jack had mentioned. Lucy Chen had disappeared from her family's home, which, according to the missing person report, had included a large golden retriever and a garden full of sunflowers. That evening, I received a call from Jack with more disturbing information. Emma, I've been looking into Rebecca Sterling's finances, and they don't add up. She's been making large deposits into her bank account, amounts that are way beyond what a social worker makes. And here's the really troubling part: these deposits often occur shortly after children go missing from other states. How much money are we talking about? Over the past 15 years, I estimate she's received nearly $2 million in unexplained income. And I found something else. Rebecca has been traveling frequently to other states, always to areas where children have subsequently gone missing. The pieces were coming together to form a horrifying picture. Rebecca Sterling wasn't just illegally adopting children, she was actively kidnapping them and selling them to families willing to pay high prices for children with no questions asked. But I needed more proof before I could take this to the authorities. I decided to investigate one of the missing children cases more thoroughly. Lucy Chen had been 3 years old when she disappeared from a playground in Portland while her babysitter was distracted. The babysitter had described seeing a woman with brown hair approach Lucy and offer her candy, but police had never been able to identify the woman. I obtained photos from the Lucy Chen case and compared them with current photos of the girl Rebecca called Emma. Despite 8 years of growth and change, the facial structure and bone structure were remarkably similar. More convincingly, Lucy Chen had a distinctive birthmark on her left shoulder, and when I discreetly observed Emma at Rebecca's house, I noticed she consistently wore clothing that covered her left shoulder, even on warm days. I knew I had to contact the Portland police and Lucy's parents, but I also knew I needed to be very careful. If Rebecca was indeed running a child trafficking operation, she likely had connections that could help her disappear with the children if she suspected she was being investigated. I called Detective Sarah Kim, my contact at Ocean City Police, and shared my findings. This is a very serious accusation. Emma will need solid evidence before we can move on this. I understand, but while we're gathering evidence, there are children at risk. What if Rebecca realizes she's being investigated and decides to eliminate witnesses or flee with the kids? Detective Kim agreed to begin a discreet investigation while I continued gathering evidence. But before we could take any action, the case took another shocking turn. 3 days later, Rebecca called me in a panic. "Ms. Richardson, something terrible has happened. Emma is missing. I think someone took her." I rushed to Rebecca's house to find it swarming with police officers. Rebecca was giving a statement to Detective Kim, claiming that Emma had disappeared from her bedroom sometime during the night. The window was open and the screen was cut, Rebecca told Detective Kim tearfully. "Someone must have climbed in and taken her while we were sleeping." But as I observed the supposed crime scene, I noticed several things that didn't add up. The cut in the screen was clean and straight, suggesting it had been done with scissors or a knife rather than torn in a struggle. There were no footprints in the flower bed beneath the window, despite the fact that it had rained the night before. And most tellingly, Emma's favorite stuffed animal, which Rebecca had told me the child never slept without, was missing as well. I pulled Detective Kim aside. "I don't think Emma was kidnapped. I think Rebecca moved her." "Why would she do that?" "Because she knows we're getting close to exposing her operation. She's probably moved Emma to a safe location until she can figure out how to make her disappear permanently." Detective Kim agreed to put Rebecca under surveillance while we expedited our investigation into her background and the missing children cases. What we discovered over the next 48 hours was even worse than I had imagined. Rebecca Sterling had been running a sophisticated child trafficking operation for over 15 years. She used her position at social services to identify vulnerable children, those from broken homes, those whose disappearances might not be immediately noticed or thoroughly investigated. She would then either arrange for the children to be taken during routine social services visits, or she would kidnap them directly using her knowledge of their routines and family situations. The children were then moved through a network of safe houses before being delivered to wealthy families who were willing to pay enormous sums for healthy, attractive children with no legal ties to their biological families. Rebecca had charged anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000 per child, depending on their age and appearance. The most horrific aspect of her operation was how she maintained control over the children after placing them. She would visit periodically under the guise of follow-up services, ensuring that the children were adapting to their new families and hadn't retained memories of their original homes. If a child began to remember their past or caused problems, Rebecca would arrange for them to be moved again, or, in at least 2 cases we discovered, they would simply disappear entirely. But the biggest shock was yet to come. When we finally obtained a warrant to search Rebecca's house thoroughly, we found a hidden room in the basement. Inside were detailed files on over 30 children, their regional identities, their new identities, photos documenting their appearance changes over time, and psychological profiles noting which children were adjusting well and which ones were problematic. Among these files, we found the truth about Emma Lucy Chen. The real Lucy had been killed 2 years earlier when she began having clear memories of her original family and threatened to tell her adoptive parents that Rebecca was not really a social worker. Rebecca had then found another child who resembled Lucy and assumed her identity. The girl I had met was actually named Maria Santos, and she had been kidnapped from a family in Texas 18 months earlier. Rebecca had been conditioning her to believe she was Lucy, Emma, through a combination of psychological manipulation and threats. When confronted with this evidence, Rebecca finally confessed to her crimes. But even in her confession, she showed no remorse for the children she had traumatized and the families she had destroyed. Those children were better off with families who really wanted them. She said coldly, "I was providing a service." There are people desperate for children, and there are children who need stable homes. I was just facilitating connections. Rebecca Sterling was ultimately convicted on multiple counts of kidnapping, child trafficking, fraud, and murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The investigation led to the rescue of 12 children who were still alive and being held by families who had purchased them through Rebecca's network. Maria Santos was reunited with her family in Texas, though the psychological trauma she had endured would require years of therapy to overcome. Perhaps most heartbreaking was the discovery that 3 of the adoptive families had been genuinely unaware that their children had been kidnapped. These families had believed they were providing homes for orphan children through a legitimate, if unusual, adoption service. The revelation that their beloved children had been stolen from other families devastated these adoptive parents almost as much as it did the biological families who had been searching for their missing children. The case led to significant reforms in how adoption agencies are monitored and regulated. It also resulted in enhanced background checks for social workers and other professionals who work with vulnerable children. For me personally, the Rebecca Sterling case was one of the most difficult I had ever worked on. The idea that someone could exploit the trust placed in child welfare professionals to commit such heinous crimes against the most vulnerable members of our society was almost too horrific to comprehend. But it also reinforced my belief that no matter how respected or trusted someone appears to be, they must be held accountable when evidence suggests they are harming others. Rebecca Sterling had hidden behind a facade of maternal love and professional dedication while destroying the lives of dozens of children and families. The case taught me that evil can hide behind any profession or any appearance of virtue. It reminded me that vigilance and skepticism are not cynicism. They are necessary tools for protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Today, 5 years after Rebecca Sterling's conviction, I still receive calls from families searching for missing children. The Sterling case showed how easily a person in a position of trust can exploit vulnerable children, but it also demonstrated that careful investigation and determined pursuit of the truth can expose even the most carefully hidden crimes. The children who survived Rebecca's trafficking network are now working with therapists and slowly rebuilding their lives with their biological families. Their recovery will take years, but they are surrounded by people who truly love them and are committed to helping them heal. As for Rebecca Sterling, she remains in prison, still maintaining that she was providing a valuable service to children and families. She has never shown genuine remorse for her crimes or acknowledged the trauma she inflicted on her victims. Her case serves as a reminder that the most dangerous predators are often those who appear most trustworthy, and that protecting children requires constant vigilance from all of us.